All right, we're back with another episode today. I'm excited about this guest because, occasionally we try to break it up with some of the best people we can find in sports. And everybody knows I have a tremendous love for sports. I'll get into a debate with anybody all day long. But I wanted to get someone on, and everybody knows I love having someone on that is, really kind of changing the game and what they do. And I was fortunate enough to find someone that we kind of share a little bit of a link. She doesn't know it yet through the Onnit family, which is cool. And this chick is totally badass, so I wanted to get a real bad bitch on. I had Heidi Smith on earlier in the week. She's totally badass. We got the one and only Yankees hitting coach, Rachel Balkovec. What's going on?
Well, that was you said my name just perfectly, so thank you. And I didn't know we had a link with Onnit. You surprised me.
I saved it.
That's awesome.
I saved it. I wanted it to be a little bit of a punch. I do want to thank the sponsors for a quick second. I want to thank everyone. Head over to www.johnbartoloshow.com. Thank you to all the sponsors, and including a special thanks to Bert and the Onnit family and everybody. In kind of a little hidden thanks to to some of the folks out there that are paying attention and going through all this right now. It's a trying time and listening. So thank you guys, and appreciate everyone. But I want to get into this with Rachel now. How did you get to this point? I mean, this is a total badass dream job, is it not? Like, this is freaking crazy. How did you how did this happen? I know this.
Oh, man. But... yeah. I can go with the 5-minute, or I can go with the 30-minute, but I guess I'll try somewhere in between there.
Split the difference.
I grew up playing sports and played college softball, so that's part of it, or at least it lends itself to me being familiar with the sport of baseball. But I started out my career in strength and conditioning for the past about 10 years, which is kind of how the Onnit family, how I came upon them in the first place. But so I was a college softball player, and then I pretty much, long story short, kind of sucked in college softball. So I really took to the weight room, which is basically the only place where I could kind of like have self-worth and contribute to the team and just like do something that actually mattered. And so I kind of like through that, I always did a good job in there. I kind of grew up a stronger girl than most. And so I just like naturally kind of went into strength and conditioning. And I was doing my graduate assistantship at LSU in Baton Rouge, go Tigers. And I decided that I wanted to get into professional baseball, which I will make that a long story short. Decided I want to get into professional baseball, and I kind of just like I was so naive at the time. My naivete level was it was just 10. It was 11. It was 11 out of 10. And I just thought, I want to get professional baseball. I had learned a lot about the minor league system and Latin America, and just like these guys are just journeymen. A lot of people don't know, but there's like the major league team, which is the TV team, and then there's usually 8 to 10 minor league teams underneath of that. So it's much more expensive than the NBA, NFL, anything like that. So anyway, I wanted to get into professional baseball and help these guys along their journey. And I was like looking up jobs. I'll never forget. I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I was like looking up jobs online, and I just was like, where are the women? Like what's going on here? I was like, wait, there's 0 names of any women strength coaches. There's 0 people that I would be contacting for jobs, or there was nothing. So I walked into my boss's office, Melissa Moore. She's still there. I said, Mel, did you know that there are no strength coaches in professional baseball? Like, do you know any of them? And she just looked at me like I was crazy. She was like, duh, like, of course there are no female strength coaches in the MLB. And I was like, so I still was pretty naive, and I just thought I was cocky, and I was like, well, I'm at LSU, and I was a Division I strength, or Division I softball player, and just like, I'm like, no, this is silly. So I applied anyway, didn't hear anything for about a year. Cardinals called LSU about a year later and said they didn't even like acknowledge my resume, but they asked the head strength coach if they had any candidates for an internship position with one of their minor league teams. So basically LSU just said, Well, yeah, we've got a candidate that wants to get into professional baseball, and they work with baseball and softball, and they were a Division I catcher. And by the way, it's a woman. What do you think? And luckily, I don't use the word lucky a lot, but luckily with like the timing and just the people that were with the Cardinals at the time and just everyone involved in that decision, they decided to give me an opportunity as an intern. Very long story short, which I can come back to, which I assume you might have heard about. But after that internship, I sat a year out of baseball. I was like blatantly discriminated against. And then the Cardinals called me back after that year and offered me a full-time job and kind of kicked off my career in professional baseball. So I spent 2 more seasons with the Cardinals, 3 with the Astros in various roles. And then I went to Europe for a second master's degree in biomechanics and statistics, did my research at Driveline Baseball in Seattle for that degree, and then was hired by the Yankees as a minor league hitting coach. So we can dive into pockets there, but I kind of skimmed over the last few years. But I'm happy to elaborate on any questions you might have.
No, I mean, I think you'll go there kind of in between, but it's amazing, right? You touched on a few points there. You go through this journey, right? And along the way, you never mention, it's not like you're shattering some ceilings, and I know that's the most overused term, right, out there, and I think you hate to hear that, and I would too, because you're just doing your thing, right? And you're just like, this is where I want to be, this is the space I want to be in. Along the way, does it ever hit you, is there like an aha moment where you're like, I can really do this, like I can really do this job? Because we all, you know what I mean? Like you go and you step in the batter's box for the first time at a D1 program, and you maybe you foul a ball and you're like, I can do this. I can catch these pitches, right? At what point do you have that moment in chasing this?
Well, I do want to say, before I answer that question, don't let me forget, because I could go down a rabbit hole. You never know.
Yeah.
But I understand when I hear people say, well, I hate hearing that I'm a pioneer, that I'm shattering glass ceilings or whatever, because I'm just trying to do my job. And I think I was, again, my naivete was pretty high. Even when I was hired full time, I just thought, you just think to yourself like, oh, okay, like I'm hired full time by the Cardinals. I think I was probably the first ever full time strength coach in the history of professional sports. If not for sure, the coordinator. I was hired as a coordinator to oversee 10 other male strength coaches and 250 athletes. So, and I kind of just thought, okay, cool. Like, so now I'm here and okay, like everyone's cool with it. Right. And all other organizations would be cool with it. And like, that just was not the case. So I was still pretty naive. And I think that's a naive statement, because now the second time kind of around when I knew there was going to be an opportunity for me to possibly be a hitting coach, I was fully aware, like there's no naivete left in me. And I'm fully aware that when I signed the paper, I was signing up for 2 jobs. And that is to be a hitting coach for the New York Yankees, but also to serve as some kind of role model and to be available for young women and to be a visible idea for them, because that's important for them to understand that they have opportunities too. And so I think this time around, after being in the game for several years, it's very clear to me, and it's not pressure, it's an honor, and it's a responsibility that I gladly accept, to just like be aware that my actions affect many people and not just myself. So I don't hate to hear that, although I will say I don't view myself as like the pioneer, right? I might be a pioneer in this little way, but I'm riding on the shoulders of many women that have come before me in other roles. Like it's a giant wave that started way before me, and I'm just like the little visible thing that happened at the right time, where women in sport and female athletics and all those things are getting way more media coverage and social media and this and that. Like, we're talking about when I was hired with the Cardinals, 2014, I didn't even have an Instagram. So things have changed societally for me to be more visible and for me to have this opportunity even. So I'm not a pioneer. I'm a product of many different things. But I do realize that like some little girl out there views me as like this idol of some kind, and I have to kind of live up to that. And I'm glad. I'm honored, and I'm glad that it's me because I know I can handle it. So that's one thing. Now, your other question, I totally forgot. What was it?
Well,
you said, "Oh, what was the aha moment?"
Yeah.
When I was because
what I mean, Rachel, by it is you always have a moment in every large goal, right, where you still doubt yourself a little bit, but you're like, I can do this. You know what I mean? Like, it's when does that kick in?
Yeah, that was I can remember exactly the feeling. Like, ironically, it was 2013. I had done an internship for the Cardinals. I had also done an internship for Athletes Performance for Arizona State. I had worked at LSU for 2 years, and I had moved to Dominican Republic for 3 months. I had a little bit of Spanish under my belt. So this is the most paradoxical aha moment. So I moved to Phoenix after that internship to start a PhD in nutrition. In Phoenix, there are 15 teams based there, 15 baseball teams that have their headquarters there. And I was doing some prerequisites before I was going to start school the following fall. So I thought, I'll apply for other internships in Phoenix with all of these teams that are based here. So I applied for like 8 to 10 jobs and got nothing back. And I was like, whoa, I thought, still naive. My naivete level was like a 9 maybe at this point because I had already worked with the Cardinals, but I was still pretty naive because I thought, I'd done an internship for the Cardinals, so now everyone will hire me and no one has any prejudices anymore. So I got nothing back, like just no emails, like nothing. I just thought, wow, I just have to keep working harder, and these jobs are really competitive, and so I got a job waitressing to like pay the bills and just went about my way with my classes. And I got a call middle of spring training that year from an organization, and they said, hey, when we had one of our coaches quit and go to another job, are you still interested in this like seasonal internship position? I, of course, said yes. I interviewed twice. The guy was like, you're our girl. Like, I want to hire you. Let me just get some HR stuff together, and I'll call you in a couple of days. And I thought, okay, never heard from him. Like weeks went by, weeks and weeks. And I was just like, well, that's strange. I followed up. I did all that. Finally, I get a phone call from him 3 weeks later or so, and he was super apologetic, and he said, Rachel, I'm really sorry. I have to tell you that we're not going to hire you because you're a woman. And that was shocking because I was so naive, like I said. And I was like, okay. I said, well, thanks for being honest, and he was like, well, I just, it gets worse. And I was like, okay, well, this is not going to be a great day for Rachel. So he basically said that it took him so long to get back to me because he had called around to all the other teams that he knew had open positions. And they all had said the same thing, that they couldn't hire me because I was a woman. So the naivete was gone, but also I was just like, there was this really strange sense of relief when I was sending out my resume and I wasn't getting responses. It was pretty confusing. But as soon as he said that A, he was wanting to hire me, and B, that he called other teams and they also saw my resume and were like, yeah, this is a great resume, but it just was like this vote of confidence in some way that I knew that I was doing the right things. I had an excellent resume for a young person. The hard work that I had put into that point was paying off, but just not in the way that I thought. And I was like, it was enough of a like light of hope, a ray of hope for me to sit out that year. And I got contacted by 8 different Division I universities about jobs in college. And it was enough for me to say, no, I'm going to wait until next season and see what happens. So it was probably in that moment where ironically, he was telling me they were blatantly discriminating against me, but that I was like, whoa, like, okay, I know I can get in because my resume is good enough. I just have to, something's got to give, like someone got a break. And then when, like the next year, what happened was the Cardinals called me back late in that off season. I thought I was going to sit on another season, late in the off season. They're like, hey, our coordinator has moved on. Would you be interested in the coordinator role? Like, how funny that I couldn't even get a seasonal internship. And the Cardinals had liked my work from when I was an intern and were wanting me to interview for arguably the hardest job in the entire organization, which is a coordinator because you're flying all over the country. You're overseeing all of these affiliates that are all over the country and also in the Dominican Republic. So it's really it's just a super high intensity, like huge amounts of responsibility job that they were willing to offer me. So it was in that moment where I just was like, okay, it's like that. You don't need the aha moment. The aha moment isn't I'm going to be the best in the world. The aha moment is, okay, there's a shred of hope. And then you can hang on to that. Just like you just said, right? You go, you're a Division I player or whatever, and you step up to the plate for the first time and you foul off the ball and you're like, oh, okay, I didn't hit a home run. I just touched the ball. And then you're like, okay, there's a shred of hope. I touched the ball.
Right.
Now I know I can hit it, you know? So the aha moment isn't like you win the race. The aha moment is just like, oh, I'm not dying. Okay, I can put one foot in front of the other and keep going.
But did you die? The
yeah.
The reason I bring that up, and I bring that up with a lot of guests, is I try to give listeners a little bit of a context of what your brain goes through when you're on that path. Everybody's like, I'm waiting for a sign. And a lot of times we don't see the sign, right? So, you know, when you play sports, it's a lot easier actually to see the signs, because I can tell you right now, I played baseball in high school. I ended up playing football a lot longer, but I played baseball in high school. And, you know, I knew I could never hit a legitimate curveball. And anybody who's ever played baseball at a decent level knows what I'm talking about. A legitimate breaking pitch. You know, I could never catch it. I just could never see it. You know what I'm saying? And I know as a hitting coach, you're probably laughing at me, but you know what I'm talking about. You know, when you see, I'm talking about legitimate pitches, you know, not high school level type stuff, real pitches. And I said, I just don't have it. I can't do this. I can hit a fastball. I can catch a fastball. I can catch a little bit of an off-speed pitch, but a real pitch, I couldn't catch. And I knew, you know, I said, I should put this down. It's kind of like basketball's an easier one for me to explain. I peaked at 12 years old. I knew then I couldn't, you know, make it to the next level.
Yeah.
You know, short, fat, and Italian's no way to go through life. But the key in all this is understanding where luck, opportunity, and hard work start to mix and meld together, and you figured that out and cracked the code.
Yeah. It was, like I said, I had put in the work, and even to that point, I mean, I had done like 6 internships before I was hired full time. I put in the work, and again, the timing, I'm not like, oh, the first woman to work hard and apply for a job. Sure, there were women before me that applied for jobs 10 years prior, and the world just wasn't ready for it.
Right. And you bring up,
so I just, you know.
Yeah, no. And you bring up luck too, almost like, you know, you don't necessarily believe in it or whatever per se. Right. But it's funny for me because I coached high school football for years after in New England, and the head coach used to always love to say, I'd rather be lucky than good. So luck played a huge factor and stuff, you know, and he's right. And I prescribe to that. Sometimes you need that break, you need that moment, and that's, if you want to call it luck. But I think luck is the emergence of preparation and hard work combined with, you know, talent. So, you know, when you bring all those together, I think you do get those lucky moments. But your journey is interesting because you did bring up knowing, you know, that you would gravitate towards strength training and conditioning and preparation. And that's okay to dive in the minutia and be fascinated and fixated with that. Like you take guys like Ernie Adams who work for the Patriots, like he lives in the minutia. You know what I mean? Digging through, you know, weird things. And there's something to be said about that. I'm not saying you're not as far off the spectrum as Ernie, but, you know, there's people that's what they gravitate towards, and they do very well at it, and they enjoy it. And that's an aha moment in and of itself. Like, I really enjoy this. I love this. I'm still going to participate. You know, like I came up in sports. I'm a little bit older than you, a couple of years. So I came up in sports when strength and conditioning programs were kind of just getting off the ground. I went to the University of Massachusetts, and to say we had 1 or 2 people as strength coaches, you know, was a lot. So it was just starting to become a thing, regular lifting programs, everything else. But I was the type of guy, I always lifted weights and trained hard, so I didn't need anyone barking up, you know, my sleeve to lift weights. And now it's evolved to such a science and such a study that it's not even funny. Take me through a little bit of what goes into, your preparation to prepare a hitter or to prepare somebody for the field, and give the listeners a little bit of insight of how much work it really is, how many hours really go into hitting, and the preparation for that.
Well, where to start? I guess. Okay, so for any athlete, from a strength and conditioning perspective, just because that's kind of the lens that I've looked at it for a very long time, is like any high-level athlete, although I know that baseball is famous for athletes who are not always looking like athletes, but I think any high-level athlete will benefit from health. And when I say health, that could mean a range of different things, but just nutrition, sleep, weightlifting, conditioning. Yes, conditioning. And that's like even taboo for like baseball players. They say, well, we don't need to run because we don't do it in the game, but it's such a long season. It's a long season for any level, but especially at the professional level, it is such a long season.
Oh God, grueling.
And so when you talk, and like playing every single day, traveling, you're missing sleep, etc. And so the better your body is in shape, the better off you're going to be, and the better able you are to recover, which is actually the most important part. So when I say it's not necessarily because baseball is an endurance sport. I mean conditioning in the sense of like you basically you want your body to perform at peak levels as like a human being. So if you are 30 pounds overweight and you can still throw a ball 100 miles an hour, but if you have 30 extra pounds of fat on you, that means that your body isn't recovering very well for the next day. Because of those 30 pounds of fat, all that tells me is it's not the actual like weight of 30 pounds on your body. It's all that tells me is you're not eating very well, or you're drinking too much beer, or you're not sleeping very well, and your cortisol levels are extremely high. And so for human performance in any realm, and I mean any realm, military, Spartan racer, marathon, baseball, pool, shooting pool, rifle, any kind of human performance where there's any kind of, physical task, being in your best shape as far as like recovery goes. So nutrition, sleep, and conditioning, breathing practices, I think that's paramount. So there's that layer, of course. And then the skill level, so mechanics, which is something that I learned in strength and conditioning. I would say I've been coaching the body for 10 years. Now I'm just coaching the body in the cages instead of the weight room. So that hasn't changed much for me. I've been more of a movement nerd. If there's anything, like strength and conditioning kind of pairs off into two groups. It's people who like to lift a lot of heavy weight and they're not as concerned with technique. And then you've got the technicians who are just like movement nerds who can see the littlest detail of movement and maybe don't put emphasis on lifting heavy or training hard. And I definitely fall right down the middle. Like I was raised by meatheads at LSU, and I also was raised by a couple of really key mentors that were excellent, like in the biomechanics area, and taught me how to look at the way that somebody's moving and be able to identify movement flaws and then possibly also ways to correct that. So there definitely is like the mechanics piece of hitting, which in order to, just to give you an example, I've probably watched in this whole COVID thing, I've watched, per day, 5-ish hours of video of our players. And that's not always necessary. It's just I'm new, and so I'm learning these guys. But I've watched so many of their swings to kind of get an idea of their habits of movement. So it's not like they go up there and just like swing different every time, right? They've got habits, and they have habits on certain pitches. They have habits in certain counts. So they start to like have movement patterns that you can identify over the course of time, and it just takes a lot of studying.
It's crazy.
Takes a lot of reps.
Yeah, it's crazy how it's evolved, because I grew up being a little bit older than you in that true meathead generation of just pound the weights harder, just, harder, go at it. And that'll, strength, cures all. And I learned through the years of doing jujitsu and a little judo and everything else, movement and body movement and mechanics, it really becomes so important. And as I've gotten older, doing things that are more applicable to whatever it is I'm doing have become so much more important to me. if that makes any sense. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm looking for one part consultation here. It's like, you get older and you start to see things. Well, I don't really need to, like Obrist got on Joe Rogan and he said, people who deadlift, for example, for deadlift's sake, he's basically like, they're idiots. You know what I mean? And I always agreed with him. And I would get in fights with a fellow Sorinex, brother of ours, Tony Sentman on Real World Tactical. Tony's a good friend of mine. And we would battle, and I would say, dude, if you're doing deadlifts for deadlift's sake, it's stupid. You know what I mean? And he's like, what do you mean you have to do a deadlift? And I'm like, I'm not training for anything. What the fuck am I deadlifting for? So you start to look at like movement for movement's sake. Am I doing this just because it makes me strong and I'm just going to be this strong person, but is it making me stiffer? Is it not aiding the end goal? You know what I'm trying to say? Is it helping in the end goal? And am I hitting a home run? But what do you think of statements like that when powerlifters get out there and they say, the average person who's just doing deadlifts for deadlift's sake, it's dumb. Where do you fall in that? That'll give me a good idea of, the radicalness of
okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't have any desire to compete. I've never competed. I was kind of born and raised in the Olympic lifting side of things, but I've never competed and I just don't ever want to. However, I still do it. Why? Because for me personally, so this is different for everyone, but for me personally, I want to be able to to give you an idea, I want to be able to go traverse a mountain and hike in rural Italy when I want to. And I did that last summer. And I'm not afraid to do that with my body because I know that I've trained. So I can kind of I know that I could scale down the side of a mountain pretty well, even though I'm not trained in rock climbing. I know that I can do that because I've trained. I know that I can go out for a 10-hour hike and be fine, and I'm not going to roll an ankle probably, or I'm not, there's always risk, but I want to train like an athlete because I want to live like an athlete. I want to be able to jump in whenever need be and go, free diving, or I want to go stand up paddleboarding, or I want to go, I just want to be able to jump into any kind of physical task and be able to do it. And that's for me personally. But here, let's take it back a step. I mentioned earlier, human performance, right? We're talking about and I don't know who your listeners are, but we're talking about wake up in the morning and just have energy to live your life. If you've got 3 kids, you need energy. You need to be strong. And it's not about being strong for strong's sake. It's about if you are lifting weights regularly, your testosterone levels are going to be higher. I don't think I need to explain why that's good for men. How about your sex life? How about your energy for your wife or your husband? I just think the human body really dictates more than we realize our mental state. So for me personally, I want to be able to act like a maniac and work 12-hour days and then go train for 2 hours and at the drop of a hat fly across the world and climb a mountain. And that's the type of life that I want to live. But maybe you're out there and you're like, I don't want to do any of that shit. Okay, fine. How about you want to wake up in the morning early enough? You don't want to feel groggy in the morning, right? You want to wake up in the morning at 7 a.m. and be able to go and have a good morning with your kids before they go off to school and still have energy to go to work all day and then go and still have energy to go to their soccer game afterwards and be enthused and not sleeping on the sidelines. And then after the game, come home and be with your wife and do whatever. Don't you want to live an energetic life in whatever that you do? I don't know. That's me. Do you need to deadlift 500 pounds or 600 pounds forever? No, you don't. You don't have to. But the more muscle mass you have, to a certain point, there's obviously diminishing returns for just about everything. But to a certain point, I would argue that a certain level of testosterone and muscle mass and bone density for women is good for just about every human being on the entire face of the earth. So there's that. Also, I mean, we're rolling here. So we're going. Breathing. So for example, breathing is something that I focus on so much in my training, but also my daily life. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept of nasal breathing, for example. But nasal breathing, if you're breathing through your mouth all the time, first of all, you're taking in way too much oxygen. So you're almost hyperventilating, which puts your body in a state of stress. So if you're doing some kind of strenuous activity, that's what huffing and puffing, right? you see somebody at the end of a run and they're just like sucking in the air. But there are people who walk around like that all day long. So they're breathing in through their mouth and they're taking in all this oxygen, and you're basically putting your body into a state of stress. And so then without even realizing it, you could control a little bit of your hormone imbalance or even your cortisol levels simply by closing your mouth and breathing in and out through your nose all day long during normal activity, and also when you're sleeping, and also when you're training. So something that I'm definitely like aware of now in the past couple of years more than ever is simply the way that I breathe. So, I mean, I could go on for a long time about that.
This is great.
This is the right podcast, but so the nasal breathing thing. So again, this is optimizing human performance in life. You're a dad with 3 kids, or you're a single mom with 2 kids, or whatever. Like, this is not about being an athlete. So your original question was like, what do you say to powerlifters that say you need a deadlift? Well, I don't know if I fall totally in that camp, but I do believe that physical training is paramount to living an optimized life in general, like no matter who you are. So the nasal breathing thing, to wrap up with that, think about what we're doing right now with COVID, okay? I'm not trying to say that nasal breathing can save your life, but your mouth is not meant for breathing. Unless you're like, your mouth is only designed for breathing, like in dire situations. So that happens at the end of a training session, or it happens when you're getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger, however many years ago, right? Like your mouth is like the last ditch effort to get the oxygen in, but really you should be using your nose, because your nose acts as a filter. Your nose is a natural filter for air, and it should be filtering out tons of bacteria and airborne pathogens that are coming into your body. So, as we all know, COVID's going on right now, and you can catch it if somebody coughs and it gets in the air and droplets. And if you're nasal breathing, hopefully that's protecting you from that. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, but also it's not. It's a true thing that your nose is actually a filter. So when I think about any kind of physical thing that I'm doing, so whether that's training, that's sleeping, that's my posture during the day, that's my breathing, it's so that I can live a better life in what I want to do. And that could be, for me, sometimes that actually does mean physical, climbing a mountain. But truthfully, it's actually way more mental than it is anything else. So it's really just about having the most energy to devote to optimizing your day, no matter who you are. Like, tell me a woman, when people are like, oh, I don't want to get bulky. I'm like, wait, so you want to have a saggy ass and like low bone density? Like, I don't understand that, or just if people say they don't want to lift weights or whatever, I'm like, well, I don't know. How's your sex life? I don't know. Like, is it healthy? Are you good? Are you mentally good? Do you feel good about yourself when you look at yourself in the mirror? Do you feel good about what you see? I don't know. Everyone has to ask themselves that question based on what they want out of life and what they want physically for themselves and what they want mentally for themselves.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, I just took probably a half page of notes on how to breathe going forward from this. So no, it's you brought up a lot of really good points, and they're things that have definitely probably crossed my mind and a lot of listeners' minds. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the hurdles, especially with women getting introduced to strength training, is they say, well, I don't want to get bulky. You brought that up. And they don't realize the time. I wish it was that easy, right? Like you picked up a weight.
My God.
Yeah, that's like the biggest hurdle, you face when you're educating some folks. Sometimes they're like, well, I don't want to get bulky. And look, it takes years to develop that type of muscle mass. It's not something, that type of muscle maturity, those types of muscle bellies. It doesn't come overnight. We know that. And that's kind of like hurdle one sometimes in explaining it to people in terms of strength training, conditioning, when you get into that power bodybuilding type of look, and people don't fully understand.
Yeah.
I think what Bob was getting at when he made that statement is there's a lot of people out there that are in these gyms, these gym rats, and we've been around them our whole lives, that they want to do 500-pound, 800-pound deadlifts, and you're trying to explain to them, listen, you run more of a risk. It becomes a risk and reward ratio. It's like what we're facing right now with COVID. At what point does the cure outweigh the disease? You see what I'm saying? So do you run the risk in anything that you do? Like people have found even with PEDs that microdosing, smaller dosing, things like that make more sense than overdosing. And, in the old days, it was take until, the wheels fall off. Now it's a less is more approach with a lot of those things because they're realizing that too much of something is not a good thing. And we've known that for years, but it was just a mentality that we all had,
Yeah, you can abuse almost anything.
Yeah. Oh, I have that conversation ad nauseum, Rachel, with people where I'm like, look, there's use and abuse with everything. You do too much, you have too much alcohol, you're an alcoholic. You have too much coke, you're a cokehead. You do too much dope, you're a dopehead. There's use and abuse with anything. You do too much juice, you're a juice head. It's just at the end of the day, you have to find a balance between all things that you do and that you incorporate, even with supplementation, with anything that you incorporate. So, lifting weights is no different. I find myself more often than not, spending a lot of time on the mats now, doing different types of movements, different types of body work. But, I've come to the conclusion that I'll be, 5'11", 6 feet, 235 pounds till the day I die, and that's what I was when I graduated high school. So, I have that body type. So regardless of what I do, I find myself back at that body type. And it's funny, Jay Cutler, the bodybuilder, always bugs me. I have to diet extra harder to stay lean and to stay in a decent condition. And I know what needs to be done. And it's kind of one of those things I come back to. Most people, I feel, I don't know what you think, know what they need to do. Even professional athletes, they know what they need to do. You're just often there to reassure, and am I wrong? Tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong, but like more often than not, they know they're not supposed to go out and have crappy food, but they do it, and you're there to keep them on the rails 90% of the time or keep them hyper-focused on what they need to be doing.
I could not agree. The statement that you just made is exactly how I feel. Like there's so much, we are inundated with information. I would buy like 10 to 15 to especially 20 years ago with the genesis of the internet, I would buy that you didn't know what to eat. But like, come on, man. I mean, of course, like there's definitely a level at which you need to dive a little deeper and you might need some true, like if you are a professional bodybuilder, you might need some true coaching. Like, we're going to, like whatever. But like for the general population and also for people who, are not at that level, like everyone knows you're not supposed to eat McDonald's at 2 a.m. It's called discipline. It's called accountability. That's why I really think coaching is, 80 to 90% of that. Now, the guys that I work with, they need the finite things for like the hit, for swing mechanics, right? Like Details. They need some refinement. They need somebody to look at their video with them. They might not know. But as far as like nutrition for those baseball players, they know all they need to know to like help them, or at least the very least the information is out there for them. The only thing that you could say is, well, there's almost too much information, so maybe they need some help sorting through. But more often than not, it's like a player will come in and be like, Rachel, should I take this organic fish oil or this brand of organic fish oil? And I'm like, bro, I saw you eating pancakes this morning at breakfast. Like, what are we talking about here? Like I don't, we are definitely.
I was going to say, are you like me where you want to punch people in the face when they come to you with two things? One always being, I don't have the time to do it. The second always being, what do I eat? And I always tell people, I go, the simplest thing, and I'm talking about like the average lay person that comes up to you, because you get that, and I know you get that a lot. You always want to say that the time thing, I'm prepared to go to the mat and die defending. Oh, I got kids, I got this, I got that. Everybody can make the time. Arnold said it 1,000 years ago, sleep faster. When people with the eat thing, I always say this, I go, look, I'm nobody be giving people diet advice, but there's 2 layers to my diet advice. Light white meats, clear liquids, and you're off to a great start. You know what I mean? If you space it out like that, and I always say diets are like budgets. If Target doesn't sell it, don't buy it. and it's really simple. Light white meats, clear liquids, start there. And they say, well, how many a day? I say, look, if I start you out on 6 meals a day, you're going to quit because it's too much eating. The eating becomes more the work. And I tell people all the time, we're going to the gym. And it's not about the gym, training in general, right? So whether you're training for a shooting match, whether you're training for powerlifting meet, anything, and you're starting from base, from scratch, I tell people all the time, and this is for the young folks out there that maybe they want to play in the major league. Don't do it 6 times a week. You'll quit. Start out with what you can absorb. I know everybody likes to be a hard gainer out there, but the reality is if you're starting out from base 0, 3 days a week is your bandwidth. Yeah. Just do 3 days a week. I mean, correct me if sure. This is for the layperson, and initially, and I think people overwhelm themselves from the beginning, from the get-go, trying to be all things.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about just being consistent. So I don't think anything I do right now, and so to give everyone an idea, I'm 32. The last time I got body fat tested was a couple months ago. I was like 16%. And I don't do anything special. I tell you, I don't. I do Olympic lifting. Okay. But that's something I've been taught for 15 years. But other than that, I do normal shit. I just did dumbbell bench press. It's COVID, so I'm a little limited, but I'm doing some basic stuff. But that's the point, is I just do all the basic stuff. And what's extraordinary about me is that my habits are so deep. It's harder for me to think about how I'm going to break my habits than it is for me to just keep going with the habit. Literally, this just happened. It was Sunday night, and I finished up with some work, and I was going to allow myself to watch a movie, which I just I don't really watch a lot of movies, but I was like, wow, I'm going to veg out, right? I'm going to watch a movie, and I literally got on Uber Eats, and it was so hard for me to sort through the menus to find whatever bad thing that I wanted to eat that I just didn't do it. I was like, I don't even know what place to go to. So I think it's just I think the basics, and like you said, starting out with the step 1 of doing 3 times a week for 30 minutes is epic. That is so huge to just be consistent with step 1. And then you could be consistent with step 2. And then you could be consistent with step 3. And then before you know it, I mean, for me, this is year, 15 of these habits building. And so before you know it, those habits become so strong that it's harder for you to break the habit than it is to just be fuck it, I'm just going to keep doing with my good habits,
And people always, like me, I have a terrible diet. People say, right now, I deem my diet terrible. But at the end of the day, it's still, and you probably go through this too, where your diet's bad, but it's still 10 times cleaner than what people would expect, right? And people don't understand that you're able to get away with that because you have X amount of years. There was this, it's funny, Heath Evans brought this up on the podcast. They have a former NFL player. Heath said, people don't realize there's 30 years of consistency built into this. So, it's people sometimes forget. And people who are looking for the quick fix or to get them on the straight and narrow fast, there's a lot of great resources out there. There's meals, there's Icon meals, there's so many great meal systems that you can buy into. And I tell people all the time, they say, well, that's so expensive. I say, yeah, but it's not meant to be a forever. Oh. It's meant to get you on the path. It's meant to get you on the path.
But also, what's more expensive, getting those or eating out 5 times a week or more. And eating, going to the grocery store and buying $30 extra of shit you don't need. Just,
toilet paper.
I understand. Yeah, right now, exactly. I mean, I don't think that I do anything. I don't think the things that I do are extraordinary. I think that probably my discipline, I feel bad saying that. There are some people that I know that are more disciplined than me, but relatively speaking to the world, right? My discipline with my habits is probably the only thing that's extraordinary. I eat the most basic stuff. People ask me my diet. I'm meat, veggies, a little bit of fruit, and a lot of water. It's just so basic.
The fruit's become a thing
I don't
now.
Do anything
Everybody's just doing the fruit. I noticed.
A little bit of fruit.
Yeah. Even Michael Hearn, everybody does the fruit now. It's I feel like I'm missing something. I gotta get some grapes or something. I don't know. It's the fruits become a thing, and you could spend hours on this, but this is big time shit. I mean, you made it all the way to the Yankees now. Where does it go from here?
I don't know. The landscape of my future is.
You got to be thinking
still,
that, right? Like you live in the now, but like, what's the, is there like a level above this?
Yeah, I just have so much to learn as a hitting coach. I'm like, 2 months in and COVID starts and you're just like, fuck, I'm trying to learn here. But I definitely have a lot to learn here. But I think you mentioned earlier something that like about being a person of like minutia, and I actually am not that person. Like there are strength coaches out there that I know that just love to spend hours and hours poring over a program and should I do 5 reps? Should I do 4 reps? Like I was never that person. I'm definitely a big picture person. I love big picture organizational culture. Like how do you get groups of humans and more importantly, large groups of humans to work together towards a common goal? And so, I mean, I even got my first master's degree at LSU was in sports administration because I thought I wanted to be an athletic director at some point. And so now in baseball, I do think that the front office or leadership position in the front office is in my future. But I'm concerned with being a hitting coach first. So we'll see. But I definitely think that being some kind of leadership position in the front office for a professional baseball organization is where I'll be sometime in the future.
Yeah, the minutia, to put it in context to everyone listening, there's extremes, right? I brought up Ernie Adams. If you do any research into him, he's the extreme of minutia. Somewhere Ernie's watching like 85 Patriots tapes or something, picking shit apart. So there's extremes in anything and in all, sports. You get into, the finite details. There's going to be extremes. So there's guys that are going to be looking and studying tape, like you might say, okay, we've watched 100 swings of this guy. I have a good breadth of what he's trying to do, but there's people that'll go back and watch 1,000. So there's extremes in everything. And one thing I brought up to a lot of UFC guests I've had on, tape and film has always been there with guys like me who came from a football background, gals like you who came from softball, baseball background. Film is making its way big time into the UFC and MMA now. Film is huge, and people underestimate how much time people spend watching film. And now even in weightlifting, film has become prolific. Film is enormous, and I don't think people spend enough time critiquing even their own movements and certain things. Do you think that's something that's just going to continue to proliferate in all sports? I mean, obviously it will, but to the level maybe eventually at baseball, because now, like guys who watch fights, they'll tell me they watch 3-4 fights. I mean, there's going to be, because there's no question you watch like Jorge Masvidal knocking out Ben Askren with that flying knee in the beginning of the UFC fight. You couldn't have missed it, right? But there had to be film study in that, right? So there's definite tendencies that people look for. How much time do you spend analyzing tendencies of pitchers and hitters and breaking that down for them, or is that another department?
I'm just starting in my journey here, but a lot. But also I wanted to touch on, like, I think that we're going to see that getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we're already starting to see a little bit of, but what we're going to see is like lifetime biomechanics. And, so like, that's something, I mean, my degree, my second master's degree was in biomechanics study. And then I did my research at a company in Seattle that, like, I was in the biomechanics lab nonstop, and they were hugely focused on that. And basically, like, they don't even trust video anymore. It's like, if you don't have biomechanics support on this, then I don't even believe you. So I think the next wave is to understand movement, of what's actually going on with someone's body is definitely biomechanics. And there are some systems out there that, with Hawkeye, with Major League Baseball, even, that are basically like, you're able to just take video from a certain number of angles and then get biomechanical data from that. And so I think that's the next wave. The technology is not there right now to be able to, like, have reliable numbers, but that, I believe, is the next wave. So you're going to see, like, with UFC and MMA, obviously it's really hard to get biomechanical data on people like that, because you can't put 50 markers on someone and be like, okay, now go rub up against somebody else's body because all those markers are going to fly off. But what you will be able to do is have video at some point. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, although it could be even sooner, we're going to have reliable data simply from strategic camera placement. And like, to give you an idea, like the biomechanics lab that I worked in at Driveline Baseball was 16 cameras. So we're talking about like, you basically have like all these different angles covered by the cameras, and then you can deduce angles of different body parts from those cameras. So I think the next wave of video watching is actually going to be a more biomechanics scientific approach.
Oh, totally. I don't want to say I study the minutia, but I look at like, even Conor McGregor in his last fight, and just see it in the UFC film coming in more aggressively. I guess it's easier to spot in the UFC right now because I see, things in his last fight that clearly, fighting Cowboy, there was film involved, just the way he was able to strike him at certain points and just weaknesses he found in his defense. And I see it in that space. And in baseball, I guess, it's easy to say, oh, film's always been there. Of course it has. I mean, it was there ridiculously when I was even playing, even at a high school level, you watch 2 or 3 tapes of a pitcher. But it's fun to see it play out. And it's kind of, once you become a coach at any level, you never watch a game the same kind of thing, so you never really watch it. You never really watch anything the same. You kind of study it and you want to go back and look at it again and again. Yeah. It's worse for me at football. Like I'm, especially watching offenses and defenses. And I think it was Spielman used to say it. He'd play the game 50 times before he played it because he always said he wasn't that good. So he had to watch the tape over and over and over again and stand there. And he purposely had to go into a room that had a large screen so he could mimic movement steps he would take when he watched certain guys make moves, certain tells, because he was like, I wasn't that good. And this is one of the best of all time. Yeah. He was like, I wasn't that good. Oh, it's crazy. That goes into visualization
and psychology because you're, especially with, like you mentioned, studying pitchers, which I didn't talk about, but hugely important. I don't necessarily study the pitchers. We definitely have like their stat line, but hugely important for hitters to study pitchers and their motion. So that you can visualize. By the time you step into the box, you've already had 50 to 100 at bats off of this pitcher, so you kind of know what he looks like. So visually, you're not having to process this and kind of guess as the ball's coming to you. You're like, okay, I've already seen that pitch thrown 50 times. So I think that's hugely important for any hitter. But that's something that. That's something I could go on for a while about as well. But it's studying. It's really just studying. It's just such a study. It's crazy because I had a friend say to me once, and I'll bring it up. You don't have to answer because obviously in the position you're in, don't answer. But you answer, but don't answer. I had a friend say to me, he said, it's crazy to see Tony Romo kill it in the booth because when I played with him, if he spent that much time studying film and that much time putting in the work, he would have been Tom Brady. It's like, because he had so much talent. Does it obviously take it back to like the college level? It must frustrate you sometimes when you see a guy have all the talent in the world, but not put the time in. And it's just one of those things, talent meeting hard work, right? That the balance between studying the tapes and the film and everything else. But, it's funny seeing that, hearing that from somebody at that level. It's always funny. Because you look back and you're like, but he was great, but they're like, if he just, put in that much more effort, he would have been lights out, he would have won every playoff game and so on and so forth. But I think, the misconception about professional sports or any, high level organization is just that everyone, like I know someone that used to work for NASA and I asked the same question, right? I'm like, wow, was NASA just like this crazy, everyone's a genius. So smart and hard. Yeah, everyone's hardworking, and you're just having these elite conversations every minute of the day. Wizards. And he's like, it's basically like every other ecosystem. Like within every tribe, and this is not even about sports or business. This is about, again, like human interaction. If you study it, like within every group of people that come together, there will be one alpha that emerges, right? There'll be the rest of them are following that alpha and that lead. There will be a couple members of the group that rely on everybody else to get the work done. There will be all the middle kind of like worker bee people that just like kind of go about their day. And then there's like those top two alphas or the top two people that are like leading, that are starting the conversation, that are there early, they leave late. Like, that's just like, that is human behavior. Even if all of the people that are at NASA are, smarter than most of the population, within that subset of people, the cream's going to rise to the top. And so professional sports is no different. All of these guys at some point probably worked harder than their high school teammates, or they worked, but like
sure.
once I was talking to an SEC coach the other day, and they're like, well, everyone that comes to our SEC team are the hardest workers on their team. So you put all these hard workers together, and you find out who's really the psycho. Like, who's really the hard worker out of the hard workers? Who are the smart people out of the smart people? Who are the leaders out of the leaders? And so with that, in every society, there's going to be like this stratification of humans.
You nailed it with that, because the first thing said to me when I walked into a UMass locker room was, Coach said to me, he looked around and he goes, just remember, everybody in here was somebody in high school. Everybody in here was an all-star. Everybody in here. And it's the same thing as you go up a level and up a level. Everybody was the stud, and it's rare. Like, every time you hear that feel-good story, oh, he was undrafted and they became a ninja. Those are very rare. It's like one in every 5 teams, or one in every 3 that you find a little diamond in there. You know what I mean? People forget, people like to bring up like Julian Edelman for the Patriots or something. Julian was a stud in college. He was a stud. You know what I mean? I'm like, come on. But it's very rare that you have like that, you know what I mean? So I try to explain that to people all the time. It's extremely rare. The thing I want to bring up is movement biomechanics, all these different things. They're so prolific. They're coming into not only shooting sports, everything else. And I love what Bert's doing at Sorinex. Bert's incorporating a lot of these different things in the stuff that he does, and it makes you think out of the box. Do you spend a lot of time doing things that have nothing to do with, you mentioned hiking and, doing all these, have nothing to do with your sport, your focus, just to kind of explore that type of stuff and to kind of see the biomechanics involved? Because in the NFL, they've prided themselves. You can't find a team now that doesn't have a former college wrestler on the offensive line or on the defensive line, because they're incorporating a lot of these different things. And now we see it in MMA, wrestlers, starting to really gravitate, and they do jiu-jitsu and they take to it very easily. So there's a lot of different specializations that are making it, but we don't see that in baseball. It's rare that we ever see that in baseball, because it's such a different sport and it leads to specialization. Do you think that's breaking the walls down of parents that raise their kids to specialize in one sport? Because I played 3 in high school, and I'm a big believer in you should play other things. It might make you better. But where do you stand on the specialization thing?
Oh, I hate specialization in any facet of your brain, of your body, of your sport. I definitely think we, especially in baseball, specialize too early. And you're seeing, you see it. I think if it's one thing that the steroid era taught us, it's that home runs sell, and that big jack dudes hit a lot of home runs. So how do you don't get big and jacked by being a pitcher on your high school baseball team, and that's it. Like, wow. You've got to train your body physically to be prepared, to basically play at the higher level, and also just to improve the sport. Like, we need players to be more athletic in every way. Like, not just, I don't mean more athletic as in they're not athletes, because they are, and they're just elite level, hitters, right? But that doesn't mean that they're elite level athletes. Being an elite level pitcher doesn't mean that you're an elite level athlete. So I definitely think having a well-rounded training regimen is important. It's something that I definitely subscribe to personally, and also just like from a mental standpoint, learning something. Gosh, just like the learning process that you would go to learn jiu-jitsu. Oh my gosh, I can't even. That is definitely on my list of things to do. But it's like we take for granted once you specialize in something and you don't ever have to learn anything new. You take for granted what the learning process is like.
It's the ultimate, Rachel. When we get into self-defense, and I know you got a chance to shoot some guns with Bert out at his farm, great facility, but it's the ultimate. I mean, if you can learn, you brought up everything you brought up happens on the jiu-jitsu mat, controlling breathing, body motion. You start to understand mechanics and how the body works. Like you get somebody like a Gordon Ryan who's the best at what he does in jiu-jitsu, and it bothers the Brazilians so much that an American dominates, their sport. But he talks about bones and physiology and stuff in his seminars that would blow your mind. It's like, just how bones are meant to bend and move, and I'm not. Listen, I'm not like one of those people. I study everything for what it's worth, whether it's blade combatives, shooting, different things, different disciplines. And I look at all the self-defense disciplines, and I think of nutrition and breathing as the first layer, lifting weights as the second layer. And I think about it in layers. And I think about it in context of like adding these layers and going through COVID. My phone's been blowing up with people that, they're constantly like talking about like what they should be prepping, what they should prepare. And I say it all starts with what you just talked about at the beginning of this, your breathing, your focus, your mental state, your everything. And then it's a layer up from there and a layer up from there and a layer up from there. Self-defense is no different than everything that we've incorporated in our life leading up to this point, and then incorporating and layering in those different belief systems and those structures. And if I tell people all the time, they're like, well, I don't believe in a gun. I'm like, then go buy pepper spray. I mean, just whatever it is, whatever it is that you feel. But, it starts with your physical presence. Do you take care of your body? Can you, I can't strike to save my life. I don't do any striking. I do judo, jiu-jitsu. If you don't like striking, then don't strike, try something else. But you have to look at it from those. My jiu-jitsu coach uses that term a lot. You're a very capable person. Be capable.
Yeah. Bert and I talk about this all the time. And I didn't grow up shooting guns. I didn't grow up with any kind of martial arts background.
Which is crazy because you're from Nebraska, right?
Oh, I know. I just did. I wish I did. We just didn't. We just didn't do that stuff. And so guns were very foreign to me. But I've had this conversation with Bert so many times. And the way that you phrased it actually is in the exact way I've had it with Bert, is that I just feel like me diving more into self-defense and shooting guns. So I've learned how to shoot a rifle and a pistol in the past 6 months for the first time ever in my life. I applied for a concealed carry for Florida, and I just realized like I need to be capable, and I jiu-jitsu is on my list because I want to be able to take someone down. And Krav Maga, if you're familiar, I'm sure you're familiar with that if you're in the martial arts space, but like being able to kill someone. I mean, it sounds so morbid, maybe to the listeners
medieval.
out there.
It's medieval. Mm-hmm.
But we've lost the ability to heal. Oh, we're all seeing it. Hello, COVID. We're seeing it right now in front of our face, how incapable we are as human beings.
And the amount of pro athletes, Rachel, that are into self-defense and firearms is ridiculous. As they start to come out of the closet about it, I can't. Yeah. If I told you the list, and you can go through my guest list, it's a mile long. It's insane.
Yeah.
And it's not all. It's easy for me to sit here and say it's all firearm based. It's not firearm based. Some of them enjoy bow hunting. Some of them enjoy, jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Some of them enjoy wrestling. Some of them come from those types of backgrounds. They're all martial arts, right? They're all martial arts. Right. Studying biomechanics in martial arts might end up being the ultimate. You could end up at the UFC PI, who knows? That's the ultimate. Yeah. But, it's all a layer that you put on top of your skill set. And if you're building a skill set towards self-defense, and like COVID right now is forcing everybody to think primeval. I mean, Rachel, the numbers just came out. 3.5 people bought firearms in March. That's ridiculously. That's just shattering every number. So I think it's going to gravitate more and more towards being the norm and being a skill set that people incorporate. Now, not to get away from, the road we started down, but it's really incredibly important to take a little bit of pride in those types of skills as you get older and your self-defense skills diminish 40, 50 years old. You have to have, the reason jiu-jitsu is really good and it should be on your list is because, I mean, geez, Helio was doing it till he was 90. You know, you can, if you have good technique and you have good fundamentals, and there's just not a lot of female black belts walking around. So it's a great self-defense tool, you know, and it puts you in very rare air, I would think, you know, to incorporate.
Well, and there's actually a woman named Cecilina Gracie who runs her last name is Gracie, so you already know, but she runs a gym in Santa Monica, jiu-jitsu gym in Santa Monica for only women. And she talks about, it wasn't originally for only women, but now she teaches only women and young girls, like really young girls. Mm-hmm. And she talks about how important it is, like think about for a woman especially, how important it is to have these skills, which is the opposite. And this is weightlifting and anything. Capability for women is so low. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to talk bad about women, obviously, but it's like the general population, it is so low. Yoga doesn't make you capable, ladies. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of yoga practices that are great for like mental things, whatever. I'm talking about physically, like bar class doesn't make you capable. Spin class doesn't make you capable. Lifting weights, martial arts, and knowing how to operate a firearm makes you capable. And, mm-hmm. and by capable, I just mean like you able to defend yourself in a situation when it comes down to one-on-one combat of some kind. And that's something that we've lost so quickly. And I mean, we're going down a great rabbit hole, I think. But like, think about it, like my own grandfather was in the World War II. My grandfather. So just 2 generations ago, my grandfather fought in a war. The last generation, my dad just barely missed going to Vietnam. Like COVID is like sadly the worst situation that we've kind of had to live through in this generation. And we're just so unprepared. So unprepared. And myself included. I don't even have a firearm. Like but I'm aware of it. And I think a lot of people aren't and just don't want to go down that road because like you said, I'm against firearms. Well, we're only against firearms because we're living in a time where, you know, firearms are kind of recreation and not where, well, my grandfather had to use a firearm because he was going to war. Like that was how he had to do that, you know?
Well, I think that's changed. I think that narrative's slowly changing, and I think the reason it's changing is because of platforms like this. People are getting more vocal about it. They're talking about it. They're having the debate. They're having the conversation, and it's just coming out more. And you know, I think mm-hmm. you know, I think as that continues, I think people will have the dialogue and have the conversation and look at it the way you look at it. And I've said this before to people. You know, you know, I said it to one guy, he got on my case. I said, you know, you don't need something until you need it, right? 1 is none and 2 is 1. And, you know, I said to somebody once and they just stopped. I said, the minute someone kicks in your door to take what you have or your business or anything else, the first thing you're going to do is call somebody with a gun.
Yeah.
It's the first thing you're going to do. So, you know, you have to look at it in the context. Well, you know, they're highly trained. Well, can't someone else be highly trained? You know, someone who takes training seriously, it's understanding those things. And I think people just don't understand them, Rachel. It's like anything else. You know, you take your training seriously. You totally have worked your ass off to get in the position you're in. You're crushing it. You're doing so much. We've said so much. We could go on and on. We've been here for an hour and 10 minutes. I really appreciate you taking the time to give people some insight into your journey, everything that you've been through. It's amazing. It really is. And I think, you know, there'll be time. We talked about shattering ceilings. There'll be time to reflect on things. You got to remember, I grew up in the Belichick area in New England. I'm in Vegas now, but you know, there's always time. He talks about the historical significance of things he's done. He always says there'll be time to reflect on that when I'm on the boat in Nantucket. You know what I mean? There's time for that later. And there'll be plenty of time for that in your journey. And I think that's where you file it for now. You know what I mean? Like we'll get there when we get there.
Sure.
But I think it's amazing.
Absolutely.
And I love the work you're doing with Bert and the crew over there. And he speaks very highly of you. You know, my hat's off to the Sorinex team. I think what he's putting together is a tremendous melting pot of folks to get together and share ideas. And that's just so much fun. And hopefully, you know, along the way, we change some things in the way people think and their thought process, just in terms of looking at the world differently through different lenses, as you brought up, both in training and, physicality and just the approach to the preparation of things. And I talk about approach to preparation because you have to prepare. So, and that's something that's, really important. It's the mental conditioning of going into things, all things, with an open mind and understanding where the puzzle pieces fit and how they can make you better. But I appreciate you taking the time, and I don't want to take more of your time, but let everybody know where they can find you and where everybody can look you up and follow your journey.
Yeah, well, thank you for the conversation. I mean, we went down some good rabbit holes, so I always appreciate that, and it's always, thought-provoking. But if you can spell Balkovec, you can find me almost anywhere, but Instagram is probably where I live the most, is Rachel.Balkovec on Instagram. And then my website is rachelbalkovec.com. And I'm kind of on Twitter, but not really. So those are kind of the two places I frequent. So yeah, you can find me there, and I'm pretty accessible.
And capable, and will be even more capable shortly. And capable.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We're honestly, we'll have to reboot this once you get through a couple of seasons or you get into this a little bit, because I'd love to pick your brain, because you just have so much knowledge and you're getting it from the tip of the spear, which is amazing. My hat's off to you, and it's a huge accomplishment. And my hat's off to the Yankees too for stepping up and hiring you, because you are, it's like I look at some of the females out in the space, and I don't want to digress and go down a rabbit hole, but like, you have such great minds out there, Steffi Cohen, yourself. There's so many great folks out there with so much knowledge to give. And, I look forward to the great things you do. And I brought up, Ernie Adams a few times. He was an eccentric and he was a unique bug, but there's always a place to plug great people in. And I think that, you're accomplishing that in making people, look at it through a lens of like, this is a great, capable person, let's hire her, fuck the narrative or the bullshit glass ceiling. It's all horse shit anyway. And at the end of the day,
absolutely.
I think you're doing it the right way. I don't know how you feel about the way women's soccer approaches it or other things, but that doesn't matter. I think that.
Oh, that's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast. And, I had it in my notes, but I think it's irrelevant. I think that you're doing it the right way. You're just saying, fuck it, I'm going to put in for this shit. And at the end of the day, let the people decide. And I think they're making the right decision. I think you are too.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This was incredible.
Fun. Yeah. I'll put all your links. I'll find your website. I'll put the link down below for your listeners or anyone that listens from your crowd. But I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you stepping up and coming on the show. And I can't thank the sponsors enough, and thank everybody. I want to give a special thanks to Sorinex. Thank you, Bert. Thank you, the team over there.
Yeah.
They're awesome folks. Go check them out. I'm on the phone with Bert. Bert's doing the show Thursday, so Bert will be on Thursday.
Oh, great. Okay. Wonderful.
Bert can shout his glories then. So I appreciate everybody, and can't thank you enough, and we're out.